All right. So, hey everybody. I hope you guys are going well through the Future of Mining challenge and creating your zero waste mine. I'm here with Brendan Howard from Rio Tinto. Brendan, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, great to be here.
Can you start by giving us just a bit of an introduction on who you are, what you do at Rio Tinto?
Sure, yeah. So my role is the General Manager of Technical Capability at Rio Tinto, which means that I'm responsible for answering the question, does Rio Tinto have the capability to safely manage its operations and meet the technical challenges of the business, and then also anticipate what the skills and capabilities are going to be required for the mines of the future. So Rio Tinto employs around about 10,000 engineers and scientists around the world, and they perform a huge diversity of roles, everything from exploration and discovery through to, mining and robotics and environmental science. It's very, very diverse. So it's an incredibly diverse and interesting role.
Fantastic. And tell me, what does a typical day look like in that role for you?
Yeah, well, look, prior to COVID-19, I used to travel a lot. I probably would spend maybe 75% of my time on the road, actually going and visiting all of Rio Tinto's offices and mines and sites all around the world. We operate in around about we have operations in around about 30 different countries around the world. So that's changed now. I do a lot of video conferencing now, but I spend a lot of time really trying to understand the sorts of technical challenges that people face in their roles and the skills that are required in order to manage those. And I also spend a lot of time studying the new and emerging technologies and trying to understand what skills we're going to require in the future in order to be able to manage those. But on a day-to-day basis, I guess my work sort of falls into a couple of categories. So one of the things that I spend a lot of time trying to do is understand, how do we measure capability? So how do we measure whether or not people have the skills to do the job? And it's not as easy as just giving them an exam. It's actually quite a challenging thing. And then we have to build learning pathways to help address any gaps that they might have. The other thing we do is we try to create what we call a learning organization. So an organization that really draws upon technology so that each year Rio Tinto can start building on the knowledge of the previous year, and it can actually be really good at sort of sharing knowledge across all of those different sites and things like that around the world. And the third area I work in is trying to get all of these to try and collaborate and work in teams more effectively. So in big companies, often it's very hard, there's different languages, different cultures, different priorities, to try and get them to collaborate. And so one of the things I try and do is try to get them to connect and work together more effectively. Because often, the answer to most technical challenges exists somewhere in the company, but you have to create the connectivity to make it possible for them to find those skills. So yeah, very, very diverse and really rewarding role that I get the privilege to do today.
That sounds fantastic. And I love how you said you travel a lot. I think that's something that's really exciting for a lot of people entering the workforce. Now, tell me, whereabouts in the world are you based? Where are you right now?
So I'm actually sitting here on I live on a farm in rural New South Wales, which is where I've chosen to live. And because it's a global role, I'm privileged to be able to kind of choose where I want to live and use technology to connect with people, no matter where they are around the world.
That's fantastic. And tell me, it sounds like you've got a very all-encompassing role, doing a whole range of different things and wearing a bunch of different hats. How did you get to where you are now? What did you study? What sort of skills have you had to develop along your pathway?
Yeah. So look, I grew up in Sydney, and I always enjoyed spending time outdoors, going on hikes, going on bushwalks, those sorts of things. And then when it came time to go to university and choose an area to study, I heard about the work of a geologist, and I thought, wow, that's really cool. You actually get paid to do that, to spend time walking around the bush and collecting samples and doing those sorts of things. So I thought, hey, that sounds like the job for me. And so I went and studied at University of New South Wales, and I was immediately attracted to this spirit of adventure that comes with being an exploration geologist. And I met some exploration geologists, and it just sounded like they had such fascinating lives. They were always off jetting around to some remote and exotic part of the world, and they're in helicopters, and they're in in boats, and they were on donkeys and motorbikes, and it just sounded like so much fun. And so I was lucky enough to join Rio Tinto actually as a graduate, and I spent my whole career working with Rio Tinto, and it was an adventure. You know, I started work as an exploration geologist, and it took me all around the world exploring for mineral deposits. I started working in the deserts of Western Australia, then I moved to work in the jungles of Borneo in Indonesia, and then I moved to South America, and I worked right throughout the high Andes of Peru and Chile. Then I moved to northern Canada, and I worked up near the North Pole, actually, exploring for diamonds up there. Then I worked right throughout Africa, looking for diamonds throughout Africa for a number of years. And then I moved on to India, would you believe, and worked in India for a number of years before returning to Australia about 7 years ago. And then during that time, I did a business degree as well. And that gave me the option to sort of switch between working in technical and then sort of commercial and sort of business type roles. And interestingly, one of the reasons I chose to study geology was that I was fairly introverted, and I always thought that I preferred spending time with rocks rather than people. But as I've gone on in my career, I realized that ultimately in life you can't get anything done without working with people. And then I realized how rewarding it is to help people achieve their full potential, which is why I really embraced the opportunity to do the role that I'm doing at the moment, which is really supporting all of these different technical professionals around Rio Tinto to achieve their full potential.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. And do you have a favorite story from your experiences traveling and working around the world?
Wow, I think there are lots of adventures, but you know, things like you know, walking through the jungles of Borneo and nearly stepping on a python that was around about 12 foot long and with a torso the size of my body. I got a very close encounter with a grizzly bear when working in northern Canada. We had lots of really hair-raising experiences flying around in helicopters in big storms in Kalimantan, in Borneo. It was just so much fun. It really was just a fantastic adventure for anyone that enjoys that sort of thing. It was great.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. And tell me now, like in your current role, you mentioned that you look at skills, getting people to work together from the business, develop skills. What are some of these like future skills you're looking for in a lot of the young graduates coming through Rio Tinto?
Yeah, so the nature of the mining industry is changing, it's becoming an increasingly digital and automated industry. Look, we still need the traditional type of profession. So we still need geologists, we still need mining engineers, we still need metallurgists. But increasingly, we're potentially just as likely to want to employ a software engineer as we are a mining engineer. In fact, I think we're looking to employ just as many of those as we previously would have employed mining engineers. So what we're after is, individuals that really have an aptitude towards the digital is an area that's becoming increasingly important to us. Areas like data science, data analytics have an incredible power to transform our business and create value, and also the whole domain of automation and robotics is incredibly important in the mining industry, both in terms of improving the productivity of the mines, but also the safety of the mines. We can take humans out of the line of fire, which is just so important.
That's fantastic. And I know in a previous conversation, we were talking about some of these remote operated mines where you can have people working for Rio Tinto, not necessarily on site in a regional town, but actually in a big city. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been working on over a number of years now is what's called these remote operation centers. The point there is that, it drives value on a number of fronts. What it does is that it means that you can actually co-locate all of the different individuals that are operating and controlling the different moving parts, and they can work together to ensure that they are collaborating effectively and really optimizing the value. But there are also substantial, I guess, lifestyle benefits. It means that individuals that otherwise might have to, do a roster whereby they're away from their families for a number of weeks at a time, can now be based in the capital city. And it means that, we have access to people and some talent that otherwise we might not have access to, because they really, don't want to be away from their family. They want to be there to support their families on an ongoing basis. And therefore they see an opportunity for them to participate. So, that started in Perth in Western Australia, where we've had a remote operations centre operating for a number of years. But now we're in the process of building another one for our aluminium operations out of Brisbane, and similar ones are being built in many mining operations all around the world today.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. It's really interesting to hear, and great to see how the mining space is changing. Now, you're based here in Australia, but as you mentioned, Rio Tinto have got mines in countries all around the world. What role does Australia play in the global mining sector?
Look, Australia is clearly a mining leader globally. There's no doubt about that. It's a major source of revenue, of taxes for Australia. But when it comes to technology, Australia has really been leading the way. We, in addition to exporting minerals, have become a really critical provider of mining technology that supports the global mining industry. When it comes to things like setting the standards and setting the expectations around safety performance, Australia has really set the global standard. And even though as an industry, I don't think we'll ever relax and assume that the job of safety is done. We've come a long way, and in Rio Tinto, we've had now, for the first time, years where there's been globally zero fatalities, which is a very significant achievement in the mining industry.
That's fantastic. It's great to hear that Australia is such a leader, but not just in the extraction of materials, but also too in the technology side. It's brilliant.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, our students in this program are looking at the whole idea of zero waste mining. Can you tell me a bit more about why is zero waste mining such an important concept for mining companies?
Yeah. Look, this is something that I think is a really fascinating topic, and it's important for a couple of reasons, Scott. So, zero waste mining is important because, firstly, there's just a simple economics, right? When you create waste, it costs money to manage that waste. You have to handle that waste. You have to store it safely, and you have to spend, potentially for very, very many years. You have to make sure that that's safely stored. That costs money, and if we can reduce or even eliminate that waste, then obviously the mines will be more profitable. The second one is that we live on a finite planet with finite resources. We need to preserve these precious resources for the generations to come, and if we can be more efficient in the way that we extract the minerals and leave a smaller footprint, then that's good for future generations. The third reason is that every mine will have neighbours, both that live nearby, but to some extent everyone on the planet is a neighbour, right? Because we're all connected through the same atmosphere, and it's in everyone's interest to make the amount of disturbance as limited as possible, because it just has less of an impact. And less, and it really means that we're a better neighbour if we're able to have less waste.
Absolutely. And on that topic of waste, what sort of waste does mining currently produce?
Yeah, so there's a couple of categories. So just starting with say mineral waste. So when you find a mineral deposit, often the minerals that are of value will be disseminated throughout the rock. They'll be like little tiny fragments or little crystals that are disseminated through the rock. And in between those minerals of value, there'll be rocks or minerals that are currently of no value. And so you need to separate those. And in the process, you'll create what's called waste rock. And when you crush up the rocks and you extract those precious or valuable minerals, often you'll create what's called tailings, which is fine crushed up minerals. And generally we store those in what's called tailings dams. Another source of waste is chemicals that are used in the processing of minerals. So sometimes, say for gold, we need to use some quite harsh chemicals like cyanide in the extraction of the gold. And that needs to be, obviously, it's a dangerous chemical and needs to be treated very, very carefully and managed very safely. There are also carbon emissions. So, mining is a very energy intensive business. You need lots of energy to carry all these, heavy truckloads of rocks around, and you need lots of energy to crush up the rocks and break them down. And most mines historically have run on sort of carbon energy, whether that be diesel or, coal-fired power stations and those sorts of things. There's also dust and noise. They're also a source of waste. And then there's just the actual sort of ground disturbance. So, the size of the footprint that's associated with the mine, the actual excavation, could be described as I guess a form of waste or disturbance that's associated with mining.
Absolutely. And it's always important to try and minimize waste as much as possible, especially as we're seeing today with the focus on sustainability and the circular economy. Always looking at how we can limit that.
Yeah.
And when it comes to mines right here in Australia, what are some of the Australia-specific challenges that a lot of mines are currently facing?
Yeah, so, if you look through time, mining obviously starts with the easier to excavate, shallower bodies of minerals. And over time, those become exhausted and you have to go deeper and you have to go to lower grade deposits. And so it just gets technically more challenging just because you have deeper pits, or sometimes you have to go underground. And because the grades are lower, you need to get more and more efficient all of the time to stay profitable because the grades are low, and often the prices of the minerals won't have gone up. So you need to keep your costs coming down and down and down so that you can continue to remain efficient. The other challenge is the locations. Most mines in Australia are located in very remote and inhospitable locations. So that just creates challenges around just logistics and infrastructure to support them. And look, in depending on where you are and depending on the minerals, there are some mines that have very strong community and social opposition, right? Whereby the communities, either locally or nationally, are opposed to them. And you need to be able to convince them that it's, in the interest of them and in the interest of society to develop those resources.
Absolutely. It's very important to look after those communities. What are some of the best practices that you've seen Rio Tinto do to really support their local communities when they do open a new mine?
Yeah, so this is something that is incredibly important. Some of the best community engagements that I've seen are where it's a genuine partnership, right? Whereby both parties feel as though they are winning. Both parties feel as though they're getting their needs adequately met. And I can think of one example when I worked in India, and we were trying to develop a diamond deposit there in a very remote and very, very poor part of India. And the workforce there, which mostly came from the local communities, was at one point, it was only men. And we said, look, we'd actually like to get some more diversity in our workforce here, and we sat down with the local community and said, how can we change this? And we actually spoke to some of the women in the community, and they said, look, we'd love to become drivers for you. We'd actually like, jobs. We'd love to get involved here. And a lot of people dismissed it at first, and a lot of the, people said, oh, look, you could never do that in this culture. But we challenged it, and we worked with them, and patiently over time, were able to empower these women and gave them the skills and the self-confidence that they were the best drivers that we had on the project by a long, long way. They were safer, they were more reliable, and yeah, they just really, really delivered for the project. Another example is at a couple of our diamond mines that I've been involved with. So I've been involved with our Argyle mine in the Kimberley region, and also our Diavik mine up in northern Canada. And in both of those cases, the Indigenous communities have had a significant economic stake in the development of the project, whereby they had really, Indigenous corporations have had very substantial contracts supporting the mining operations, and in the process, we're actually building up not only the financial resources, but the skills and capabilities that were transferable right across the broader economy. So that they were, getting to the position that when the mine closes, that you're left with a thriving community with individuals with very strong skills that can be deployed in many, many other parts of the economy, not just restricted to the mine itself.
Absolutely. And taking those from what you've seen there, but also to seeing some of those future trends you're noticing, what do you think the next 20 years to 30 years of mining are going to look like?
So you want me to use my crystal ball there, Scott? On
Gazing into the crystal ball, if you had to, or just a few key trends that you are starting to see emerge that you think will really start to grow.
Yeah. So look, I mean, as I said at the outset, mining is becoming increasingly digital. It's becoming increasingly automated, and that's an irreversible trend. It's something that has been fantastic for improving the safety. This reputation or this perception that a lot of people have that mining is dirty and dangerous is really pretty outdated. And it's technology that's really helping us to change that. And what it means is that, I think we're working towards a future of mining that ultimately will be, fully automated, right from, the exploration through to the mining itself, through to, transport through to customer. And it means that humans will be able to, do the really cool and interesting stuff, and not maybe the boring and monotonous type of work. And when you take humans out of the mining equipment, it allows you to reimagine what a mine might look like. So a lot of our mining equipment is really big because it's designed around the cost of the humans that are operating that equipment. If you take the humans out, you could imagine a mine that was more like, a big ant's nest, right? That actually had a billion tiny sort of matchbox size pieces of mining equipment that are like, a billion tiny little drones that are all sort of, navigating their way underground, finding the precious minerals and bringing them back. And this is all happening, invisible below the surface. And then once it's finished and they've recovered all the precious minerals, then they're actually, there's actually no obvious sign of any impact. So that's one possible future, but there are lots and lots of emerging technologies that are really trying to make mining really very, very efficient, to make it absolutely minimal waste and minimal environmental impact, and really the word sustainable, so that we're drawing on only renewable energy sources, and ultimately at the conclusion of mining, leaving the environment pretty much as we started, pre-mining.
That's fantastic. And with that, are you able to dive a little bit deeper on any of the technologies Rio Tinto are currently using when it comes to making mining safer, cleaner, and a little bit greener?
Sure. Yeah. So, look, we have been running many automation technologies for a number of years now, and if you look at our mining operations today, they have fully automated truck fleets. They have automated drills, automated sort of blasting technology. They have automated trains, so driverless trains that carry the ore from the mines to the coast, and then automated ship loaders. So, lots and lots of robots all the way across the value chain. One of the big things just in the most recent history that we're seeing a real explosion in is the use of drones and remotely operated vehicles. So that's really only been limited by our imaginations in terms of the potential applications. There are a lot of maintenance and sort of integrity inspections that take place that previously meant that humans had to put themselves into dangerous places in order to do that. Now we just send in the drones, and we allow the drones to do that sort of work. And so now there actually is a job title inside Rio Tinto for drone pilots. That's actually a category of job, believe it or not. So there are people that do that today. When it comes to renewable technologies, we've set a very ambitious carbon reduction targets for ourselves as a business. We believe very passionately how important that is, that we're part of the solution when it comes to addressing climate change. And part of the way that we're bringing that to life is by investing in renewable technologies at our operations. It actually, as much as anything else, just makes economic sense, to switch to renewable energy sources for say our mines here in Australia. But actually, many of our mines around the world, if you look at our aluminium business, where we have the smelting operations, for many years they have been powered by in Canada by only renewable energy, and that's actually been a source of advantage, particularly when we're looking for customers that want a product that they can have confidence in, that it has a low carbon footprint.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you for taking the time to share all of that with us. It's been fascinating hearing everything about it. Now, just before we go, do you have any last words of advice, of wisdom, or anything for any of these young people that are watching right
now? Look, I try not to use cliches, but I think, the old saying of find something you're interested in and passionate about, and you'll never work another day in your life. I feel as though I've been lucky enough to have that, that I've found something that just really fascinated me and has given me tremendous fulfillment. I'm a fairly, I guess, curious fellow, and I just love to understand how things work, which is why I just love science so much. And so I think if you can find something that you're passionate about, good things will come, and just to stay curious. That's the most important thing, I think, because if you follow your curiosity and keep asking those questions, then you're very likely to find something that really engages you, and will very likely deliver a very rewarding career.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brendan. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat to us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Scott.